Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar on how to collaborate remotely on an Animatic with Flix and Storyboard Pro. My name is Elise, and I am part of the field marketing team at Foundry, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you Brice Banel and Terry Rysat. Brice is the Flix Product Manager, and Terry is the Head of Creative Services for America, and they'll be presenting today's webinar. But before we get started, I have some quick housekeeping for you. First of all, today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be sent directly to you when we're done. Also, the session will end with a live Q&A. So if you have any questions, please add them into the questions tab on the right-hand side and be sure to stick around to the end to get your answers. Today is the last virtual event for 2020, and we made the most of this unexpected year by hosting over 50 virtual events, all of which you can find either on our live stream or YouTube pages. And we'll be returning in 2021 on January 14th with a Mari Skill-Up. So be sure to stay tuned to our Foundry events page for more information. I'd also like to take this opportunity to call out our Learn portal, where you can find installation and user guides, release notes, tutorials, and more. And at the bottom here, you can see a couple examples of the tutorials that we have available for Flix, including a Flix and Storyboard Pro series to complement today's webinar. And while you're on our website, I'd also encourage you to check out our Insights Hub, where you can find articles and case studies, including top trends of 2020 and an artist spotlight on Neville Fritas. Also, if you're on social media, connect with us at Foundry Team or at the Foundry Team to stay up to date. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to all of the studios and our guest speakers who have participated in our virtual event series this year. I'd also like to say a special thank you to everybody who's attended. Due to your enthusiasm, you've inspired us to come back week after week, and we look forward to putting on some more great events in 2021. So until then, have a happy holiday. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and thank you again for attending. So with that, here's Brice and Terry.
Hi, yeah, just wanted to say hi before we get started with the recording. So yeah, I'm Brice, Product Manager for Flix. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope this is going to be helpful. Please do not hesitate to ask questions in the questions tab. You know, I'll try to answer them as we go, but like the most important ones or whatever, we'll try to address at the end. So yeah, feel free to just ask questions, and we'll touch on everything, hopefully. Yeah, that's it. Let's do it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Collaborate Remotely on an Animatic with Flix and Storyboard Pro. We're going to explore Flix with different users that are all working remotely, and it's going to be from the perspective of a production coordinator, a story artist, a director, and an assistant editor. We'll create an episodic project from scratch and work through a sequence in Flix while working with Storyboard Pro and Premiere. We're going to explore the pre-production workflow from storyboard to editorial while round-tripping the revision process, all managed by Flix. By the end of the webinar, we will have finished our sequence and we'll publish it to Shotgun. Flix will be the key to all of this, and it's going to allow the team to work seamlessly and collaboratively from across the world. Terry, that's myself, the Head of Creative Services for the Americas, is located in Toronto, Canada, and will be the production coordinator as well as the story artist for the project. Brice, Flix's own product manager, is located in London, England, and will be the assistant editor on their project. And finally, Martin, the Head of Creative Services for EMEA, whom is located in Vienna, Austria, will be the director on the project. For this project, we'll be round-tripping through applications and switching through various users. We want to keep this workflow pretty clear, so we're going to use a scaled-back sequence with manageable revisions as to not make watching this too confusing. So of course, in production, projects and sequences will have a wide range of complexity. This webinar should get you in the path to understanding how to manage this workflow. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm currently the production coordinator, and I want to set up the project so the team can start working on it. I've launched Flix, and I'll sign in using the method provided by the IT department. In this case, I will sign in securely using Google. First thing I want to do is create a show, so I will hit the New Show button, and we are taken to the Create Show panel. From here, I want to add a tracking code. This is a short code that will help us with naming conventions, so more on that a little bit later on. I will add the title, a description, and I'm also going to add a preview image. Next up is frame rate and whether you want episodes or sequences for the show. In this case, we want episodic, so we will toggle it on. We are working on Season 1. We are now at the permissions where we can assign groups to the show. This is handy if you want artists to only be able to view certain shows in Flix. We're going to set this to default. All right, our show is now created. So clicking on it will navigate us to the episode level. Since this is our first episode, we will be prompted to create a new episode. So let's go ahead and enter some information here. The tracking code is required for the episode. The rest of the information is optional, so I'm going to fill it out for this first one. Now let's go ahead and create some more episodes. We can see how quickly we can do this. When we're done, we can hit close, and now we're on the episodes page. From here, we can select the first episode that we're using. Once we do this, we'll be presented with the new sequence prompt, as we don't have any sequences yet. Let's go ahead and enter a tracking code and any information that's needed. And we'll hit create. Again, we can quickly build out as many sequences as needed, depending on what is required for the show. When we're done, all the sequences are available to everyone that has access to the show. Available to everyone that has access to the show. So I've built these out quite quickly because I want the team to get to work, but I can always go back in and edit any details for each one of the episodes or sequences. Now that the project is set up, the artist can get to work. But first, it might be a good idea to set up some rules for the production to follow, such as naming conventions, settings when communicating with Premiere, and so on. So I'm still the production coordinator, and what I want to do now is set up naming conventions and other rules to keep things outside of Flix organized and consistent. As a production coordinator, I've been granted administrator privileges, so I can access the management console. This will give us access to things such as user and group management. I want to stop for a second and just make a quick note that if you're interested in more detailed information on all these settings, please have a look at the Foundry Learn section from foundry.com. And under Flix, you'll see a series called Collaborating on an Animatic Remotely. And this will go into detail for these settings. You can, of course, also refer to the documentation. Okay, so the studio settings are a subset of the user preferences, and these are things that can be driven and enforced by the studio. We'll just quickly set ones we need for this webinar. Again, you can refer to the previous webinar for more detail. So under third-party apps and general, let's go ahead and make Storyboard Pro our sketching tool. Let's look at Editorial and make sure Premiere is the only editorial package that Flix can publish to. We can do this by having this setting enforced at the studio level. We want to do the same for the clip and sequence naming conventions to ensure consistency. Same thing for the publish path. We want to ensure that every delivery ends up in the same location for Editorial to retrieve. Enforcing these at a studio level will lock these preferences, and users without administration privileges will not be able to change them. Down below here, these are the naming chips. This is where we construct what paths and file names will look like when they resolve at a publish time. We can see some examples here. We have date, show tracking code, and so on. Flix has a logical convention already set up, but you can modify it to something custom for your studio. For the Premiere options, you want to sit down with your editor and agree on preferred settings and enforce them so that no matter who publishes them, all deliveries will be consistent. For the marker type, you can choose between timeline and clip markers. We will use timeline. And we'll let Flix highlight new clips in Premiere. Finally, for export paths, at times when you need to export PSDs or QuickTime or other file formats for whatever reason, you can ensure that all exports are organized and enforce them at a studio level if needed. If I load my user preferences as a user, these will be grayed out since they have been enforced by the studio. Now let's look at the Storyboard Pro options. We want to make sure that Flix knows where to find Storyboard Pro. Since we'll be mainly using Storyboard Pro, let's also enforce how camera moves are handled. We're going to choose to hold first frame, as rendering all the camera moves when we import back into Flix can be time consuming. So this is a good way to preview in Flix while maintaining the camera move once it's delivered to Premiere. Okay, and now all our settings are set up and enforced at studio level when needed, and now we can go ahead and get to work. Okay, so now I am the story artist. We've been working in Storyboard Pro and we are well into a sequence. So we can see that we have quite a few panels, we have different scenes, dialogue is present on a few boards, and now we want to move it forward into the pipeline by bringing it into Flix. So we have a sequence but no entries yet. Let's go ahead and import the Storyboard Pro project. Select the Storyboard Pro file that we've saved, and you can add a comment here if you'd like. The import process will start. First, Storyboard Pro will export the PSDs from the project, which Flix will then upload, and render to create a new sequence revision, which appears here with the comment we added. We now have all the boards from the Storyboard Pro project inside of Flix. We have all the markers that represent the scenes from Storyboard Pro, and the dialogue appears on the boards that had dialogues in the project. Now we don't have any audio in our project, but if there was, it would be flattened and imported into Flix along with the rest of the project. So I'm ready to have this sequence be reviewed by the director, so let's go ahead and do that.
Hello, I'm Martin Meyer, the director for this episode, and I want to go ahead and have a look at the sequence and make any notes for revisions I might have. I have gone through the sequence and I've spotted few things. Having a look at the first few boards, I think I would like an additional board here to slow down the pacing of the first bit with the envelope. I will go ahead and add a comment so that everybody is aware. For panel 4, I think it would be better to see more detail. I think we should zoom in on the mail and then have an over-the-shoulder shot so we can see what the letter is about. We should also show our character's Victoria's worried face as she reads it before talking to her mom. On panel 5, I think it would be better if she had her back to her mom, still reading the letter and wondering how to tell her mom before turning around. If I want, I can also use the annotation tool to help with specific visuals. At panel 26, she's at the teacher's door looking at the flow. I think we need an extra shot with the teacher inviting her in, instead of doing it with the teacher off the camera. Moving at panel 35, I think I would like the camera to pull out. The rest looks good to me, so I will make a comment that I have reviewed it and I'm going to save the project. Now that I have done that, the artist can go ahead and start to do the revisions.
Okay, so I'm back as a story artist. I'm in my sequence panel and I can see that there is a new revision with the comment reviewed, so I will jump into that. I can quickly find all the comments by the icons in the panels, or I could use the filtering system to isolate the panels with comments. So at this point, I can refer to Flix for the revision notes while making the changes inside of Storyboard Pro. In the Storyboard Pro project, I've added the requested additional boards in the areas that needed them. I now have some camera moves for some of the boards, and I've gone in and addressed the rest of the revisions that were needed. Now I want the changes I've made in Storyboard Pro to update inside of our Flix project, so it's time to import the next version of the project. It's important that these notes from the director were addressed in Flix, as it's our centralized hub for the production, this show, this episode, and sequence. I'm going to take a quick glance at the panel browser and confirm that the changes are there. I can see the new boards that I've added. Here are some more, as well as the other revisions. I've now updated everything in Flix, and everyone in production is up to date. The production coordinator can now confirm that the notes were met and then send things over to Editorial so they can begin their work. I'm now the production coordinator and I want to push things over to Editorial. The first thing I'll do is make sure that the notes were addressed and close off any comments. The first note is regarding the additional boards off the top, and I can see that the artist made the change in Storyboard Pro, and they are reflected inside of Flix. I'll go ahead and check off this comment. The next note involved zooming in, adding an over-the-shoulder to see the mail, and then seeing Vic's worried face. I see that all here, so that's great. Let's mark this one off. The next revision is to have her back facing her mom. I can see that this happened, and I can always refer to version 1 of the board to show the difference. Okay, great. Another one to mark off. Next one is an extra shot needed of the teacher inviting Vic in. I can see that here, and it looks great. Last one is to have the camera pull out. So since we chose to hold the first frame on any camera moves, I'll confirm this one by looking at version 1. I can clearly see a difference in the framing, so the camera move is in, and we are good to check this comment off. Alright, so we're ready to begin publishing. I'm going to note that everything looks good and is ready for editorial. Let's hit save. Now, once I'm done, I'm going to go ahead and press the publish button. So we're going to get our publish options. Now, from here, we want to generate a contact sheet, and I'll add a comment that this is the first pass to editorial. And let's go ahead and press publish. Flix will go ahead and generate a contact sheet and get all the assets needed for publish. Flix can even send an email alerting the necessary people that something has been published to editorial. Now, once it's finished, the publish folder will open up and we can see what was done. We have our contact sheet, which was generated, so let's open that up. The boards that are being delivered to editorial for the first time are highlighted as new, so in this case, everything is new as it's our first publish. We have the shot number listed at the top of the panels, and the dialogue is included. So this is really a great way for editorial to get context for what they're going to be receiving. We have 2 XML files, and we'll touch on this a bit later. But most importantly, let's have a look at the paths and naming conventions. Through the management console, we set up our editorial paths for a publish directory. The first part will depend on where we want the publishes to go. We then have a slash, which represents a folder. Flix creates these folders as they don't exist. The folder will be named by the show tracking code, which is, in our case, TD, and the sequence tracking code, which in this case is 0010_PTI. Next, we have another slash, so a subfolder will be created, and this time it'll be named by the date and sequence revision. Now let's have a look at the editorial sequence name. We first have the show tracking code, episode tracking code, sequence tracking code, and then the sequence revision number. And finally, editorial clips will be found in the assets folder, and we have it set up as the show tracking code, sequence tracking code, panel ID, and panel revision. If we have multiple publishes, Flix will make new folders adhering to the rules that we set up in the management console.
Alright, so now let's take a look at the XMLs we received in editorial. We have the all version, which will contain every panel from the sequence, and then the new version, which will only contain panels that were added or edited since the last editorial publish. Since this is our first publish, every panel is new to editorial, so both files will be identical this time. I'll drop the all XML into Premiere, and let's see how things come in. So you can see the clips have all the right names with the expected naming conventions. The sequence is created, also with the expected naming conventions. Clips with camera moves have keyframes on them in the timeline to recreate the camera move, but let's look at the source clip in the source monitor. You can see the editor will have the full canvas from Story, so they're not restricted to the framing done by the story artist, and they can update the keyframes to clean up the camera move. The timing of the clips, initially set in Storyboard Pro and reflected in Flix, is also sent to Premiere. And finally, we have the timeline markers representing the beginning of each shot, which again have been passed through from Storyboard Pro to Flix and then Premiere. Flix has taken care of the naming convention and the folder pipeline for publishing in a clean and consistent way. We have control and enforce this at a studio level to ensure there is consistency throughout the production. So far, we've passed information from Storyboard Pro to Flix and through to Premiere, and we'll continue our production round-tripping. So with that, editorial can now make some adjustments to the edit. So time has passed, Let me walk you through the changes our editor has made to the edit. First, obviously some audio has been added for background noise, sound effects, and dialogue. The first camera move on this clip has been smoothed out, so it now focuses on the letters in our characters' hands. A couple of boards have been removed, as the director thought it would make for better pacing as she walks into the school. It looks like Story will have to adjust her character position because she doesn't line up exactly anymore. We've added a couple of extra panels here to have more focus on her facial expressions. So to do this, our editor has used existing boards from later on in the edit. This is good for now to show the intent, but it's likely that Story will have to revision this to fit the shot better. These are all the changes for now, and since there's been a few adjustments, it's beneficial to send this back to Story. So to do this, we'll have to export the sequence out of Premiere. First, we'll export an XML. Once that's done, we'll also export the video, which Flix will use to extract audio, as well as any clip not originating from Flix, which might have been added in Editorial as reference. We'll make sure to export the QuickTime in the same location as the XML previously to make it easier to re-ingest in Flix.
Now that Editorial is started, there are revisions that need to get addressed by Story. Let's go ahead and bring the edit into Flix so we can pass that information to Storyboard Pro and keep our pipeline running smoothly. So this time we're going to click the Editorial button. We have our Editorial package set to Premiere so we can see that the panel reflects that. We're going to browse and select both the XML and the movie that Brice exported out of Premiere earlier. For how to handle effects and new clips, we can choose on the fly if we want to render all frames, hold the first frame, or ignore the effects. In this case, we want to render all the frames. Let's enter a comment back from Edit and import. Flix is now looking at the XML and finding where the changes are and then rendering what is needed. Once that's done, we will have a new sequence revision. Note the check mark letting us know that it's back from Editorial. Now let's jump into the sequence and have a look at the changes that were passed from Editorial. Now this time I'm going to use the highlights in Flix so the team can clearly see which sections have been touched and if there's any action needed. In panel 4 we have the animated panel icon on top. The camera move has been adjusted in Edit and zooms into a different area. So now this is represented and it's updated inside of Flix. The story artist won't have to do anything on this, but what I'll do is add a yellow highlight which we'll use to represent a change to a panel that doesn't need any action. In this section, the editor decided to remove some in-between boards to adjust the pacing. The character will need to be recentered and scaled a bit, so I will highlight this with red so the artist knows that action is needed on their end. I can of course also be leaving comments to clarify any direction. So we have some new panels that were added in the edit as well. We can see that these have the reference icon on top of the panel. The artist is going to need to clean these boards up, so I will highlight this in red as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save, and now the story artist can reconform these new editorial changes inside of Storyboard Pro through Flix. Okay, I'm back once again as the story artist, and I have the last version of my Storyboard Pro project open. Now, since the last time I had opened it, it went to Flix, then Premiere, then back to Flix. So now I can reconform my timeline to the latest edit from Premiere, thanks to Flix. I have Flix open and I'm in the sequence. I'm going to press the Open in Sketching app button and it will ask me to export to Storyboard Pro. Once it's done, I'll get the notice and it will let me know where I saved it. I can press the clipboard icon to copy that. And it also tells me how to reconform the project inside of Storyboard Pro, and it's telling me to go to File, Confirmation, Import Animatic Project, and paste the path. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go to File, Confirmation, Import Animatic Project, and paste the path. So we have some options here. If there's audio from Editorial, we can import that audio as a flattened track. We want to process the video, of course. We can also process the captions, and this is if there's dialogue that's been updated in Flix, then we can have it updated here as well. Now let's keep an eye on the timeline. We can see that the entire timeline has changed and it's now been reconformed. So let's quickly compare this. I'm going to hit undo so we can see the timeline before the reconform. And then I'm going to hit redo. We can clearly see the difference. There is now audio and there is new timing in the boards. Things have shifted and so on. So this is a good visual confirmation that we have reconformed the project from Flix. So now let's explore. We have the updated camera moves. This is the area that had some boards removed, so we can see that's also been updated. We have the extra panels over here, and all the layers are available. I'm going to save this now, and all departments are up to date, so I can go ahead and make any needed changes. Now, once I'm done, I want to get it back inside of Flix. Okay, so some time has passed, and I've done my revision. Now let's get some context. I've aligned the character between these two boards and they match perfectly now, so that has been addressed. These are the added boards from Editorial. I've cleaned them up from the temp versions to a finished version, and so that looks good. Now that's all I was needed to do for this pass, and all the other areas that were flagged in Flix did not require me to do anything. They were more for my awareness, so I'm ready to save my Storyboard Pro project and bring it into Flix. I'm going to import the latest Storyboard Pro project and let Flix work everything out. Once I'm done, I can see the new sequence revision, and I'm going to hop in and verify that all is well. I'm going to go down to this area and I can see that the panels have been versioned and my changes are in there. And the other change, I can see the cleanup work that I've done and it looks good. So I just want to verify visually that my changes from Storyboard Pro are now reflected in Flix. And they look good. So with that, I'm going to hand this off and it's going to make its way into Editorial and then eventually Shotgun as we get closer to our final animatic.
Hi, it's me again. I'll be doing the publish this time because our production coordinator is busy with something else and we really need this to be pushed to edit. Now that Flix has done this, let's look at the contact sheet that was generated. So this will be more helpful than the first time around because most panels have already been delivered to Editorial. Here, panel 11-2 is a new one we'll receive as part of the publish. And there's another couple of new delivered boards here as well in this shot. Now for the XMLs. Like earlier in the all XML will have all the clips, while the new XML will only contain the 3 new clips marked as such in the contact sheet. Let's just have a look at the assets folder here, which highlights the fact that Flix has only exported these 3 new clips instead of redelivering every single panel from the edit, which would cause a lot of media duplication in Editorial. It's also exported a flattened version of the sequence audio as a reference. This time, we'll bring in the new XML. So let's open the sequence to see what it looks like. As expected, only the 3 new clips are in the timeline, but the timing has been retained, which should make it fairly straightforward for me to cut these into our master sequence. So let's do this now. I'll copy these 3 clips from this sequence. I'll go to the master sequence that our editor has been working on. We'll add a video track to insert these new boards, and we'll make sure to find the right board here and paste the new clips in. So we now have the updated boards in the right spot in the edit, because we get the timing from Premiere initially, but also because our editor hasn't made timing changes since, so it all fits nicely. Now that we've got the updated boards in the right spot, we can clean everything up. Obviously, this process can be repeated over and over until your final locked animatic. We'll stop here in this case for the purpose of this webinar, but in a more real-life scenario, you may want to make more changes and push them to story, in which case we could push this back to story and repeat the whole process over again. So now that we have something that resembles a final animatic in Editorial and in Flix, it's probably a good time to start pushing the shots to production as part of the production handoff process. So Flix doesn't yet have a built-in production handoff tool that will do this out of the box, but it does have a powerful RESTful API which can be used to pull all the information you need from Flix server. We have a public repository on GitHub with a few examples on how to use the Flix API. In the last webinar, we showed how to pull a Flix edit into a hero or Nuke Studio as a type of production handoff. There was a couple of other examples in here, but in this case, we want to focus on the production handoff and specifically to Shotgun. I've downloaded the example script from the repository, and I can now run this here. This is just an example script behind a simple user interface, so it can be used by anyone in production. And obviously, everything about it can be extended or customized to the needs of your production. Once I've logged in, I can select the show, episode, and sequence I want to hand off. There's only a single sequence here because others in the episode don't have any revisions in them. There are two options. You can either do a local export, which I've already run, and I will show you what that looks like in a couple of minutes, but we'll focus on the Shotgun handoff here. I'll just enter the URL to my Shotgun server and my credentials, and the script will start the process for us. Using the API, this script will find the latest revision of my sequence, generate a QuickTime for each shot, and upload each to Shotgun as a new version. It will also create the show, episode, and sequence as I've not created them in Shotgun beforehand. While that's processing, let's quickly look at what the local handoff did when I ran it before recording this. It's basically done what the Shotgun publish would do, but has saved everything locally instead of uploading to Shotgun. It has created a directory for my show, for my episode, my sequence, and a revision that was exported. A directory for each shot has been created, each containing a QuickTime for the shot, as well as the original artwork and thumbnails for every panel contained within each shot. Our app is still processing shots and uploading them to Shotgun, but let's just go have a look at Shotgun now. You can see the TD show is here, and you'll notice that there's been some activity with shots uploaded. Flix will also have created the episode and the sequence, which I will load now. And you can see that all these shots have been created by Flix automatically, each with a QuickTime associated to them as a new version. And we're now ready for shot production after that handoff from Flix.
Thank you everyone for watching. Now, although in this webinar we were working through one sequence, in a production environment you would have multiple story artists working through multiple sequences all at the same time. There is so much fluid movement at pre-production and makes it tough to keep track of everything. Flix is all about bringing the order of chaos to pre-production. So let's go ahead and head over to the Q&A.
All right. Yeah, that's it. I don't see a lot of questions, so I will try to fill the blanks. But if you do have questions, please ask them. We'll address them. I saw a couple asking about different integrations. So I just wanted to touch on that quickly. Obviously, here we're just showing how Flix works in a Storyboard Pro and Premiere sort of environment. The previous webinar that we did, I think it was back in June, July.
Sounds right, yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, it was more, focused on the feature workflows of using Photoshop on the sketching side and Avid Media Composer on the editorial side. And instead of pushing to Shotgun, we actually pulled everything into Hero and directly in a timeline, which is pretty exciting. So yeah, that's about it. I saw a question about TV Paint. We don't currently have an integration with TV Paint. However, we do have some examples on how to send basically any sort of image, whether that's from your desktop or Blender or from Maya or any application that can spit out a PNG or something like that, to import that as a panel in Flix. So anyone with some experience writing some scripts, especially for TV Paint, I think it's in George, which is always exciting. You can always import things like that. But yeah, it takes a little bit of coding to get that done, obviously. Can a story artist do an entire show and then push it into Flix? An entire show, it really depends. That's one of the things that's tough to show in a webinar. That's what Terry is saying a couple of times in this. In the intro and the outro, is like we really try to simplify everything. Of course, you're not going to have a sequence this short. Of course, you're not going to have so few revisions and notes. We just try to keep it light and just focused on one sequence. So a story artist can do an entire show, in Storyboard Pro. Obviously, the bigger your project in Storyboard Pro, if you have a project for the whole show, that's going to be a very long time to import everything into Flix and then to send over to edit and come back and things like that. So really, we always recommend to break things down, obviously for a feature into acts and sequences, for an episode and sequences. But there are improvements that we will be making for, because a lot of the time a story artist might want to break things down into sequences, but an editor would prefer working on an entire episode. So there should be a way within Flix to be able to bring all these bits from the different parts of the sequence and publish everything as a whole to Editorial and communicate like that. So that's definitely something we're looking to do for sure. Great question, Woody. Complex camera moves and things like that. So there's basically two main ways, I suppose, to do some moves in Storyboard Pro. There's the camera moves, where you just move the camera, and the layer transforms, where you can actually move layers in your board. Unfortunately, we don't really have that information from Storyboard Pro at the moment to know exactly how the layers move in relation to others. However, what we can do and will do, that will be one of the first features in the 6.4 release, is to get those layer transforms. Any board that has a layer transform will actually be ingested as a movie, so that you have the whole animation from Storyboard Pro directly in Flix, passed on to Editorial. So that's kind of the way it will be expected to move. I am hoping to have some sort of teaser video or something like that in the next couple of months to show how that should work with layer transforms through Storyboard Pro, because it is definitely a big thing in TV, and this is definitely something we're focusing on with Flix right now. Thank you, Woody. And yes, the last time you saw Flix, I think you saw Flix 5. So it's changed a lot, I want to say, over the past couple of years. So yeah, glad you liked it. So I see something here. What's the difference between Flix and integrated solutions and Shotgun or things like that? It really depends, The whole thing about Flix is that it is a software that is made for creatives. It is a way, we are trying to get every creative stakeholder on the project to look at Flix, again, as a creative solution rather than just a spreadsheet full of things. So that's really what we're trying to bring, differently. We try to bring all the collaboration aspect. Everyone should be involved in that. So that's really what we're trying to achieve here. Michael, I see you have a question about seed markers and had some issues bringing them, to and from Editorial and things like that. So, the way it works with Flix is just whenever you have a marker, let's say in Editorial, we'll just bring that marker in the same panel that it was applied on in Editorial. It's still based on time code, so we will set those markers in the edit in a correct spot. If it is something that you've had issues with, definitely get in touch with us, with our support team. I'm sure they will be able to help you.
I wonder if Brice, if that might be just like, say Flix has a frames per second setting that's different than the Premiere one, maybe that would cause an issue.
It's possible. It is definitely something that we've seen before. You have a show at 25 FPS and Premiere in 24, and every now and then a marker is in the right spot and is in the wrong spot. It might also be that your markers are turned off in Flix. I think that's the default behavior. So yeah, that might be it. Are there any plans to have a send to Flix button in Premiere rather than having to go to Flix and import the latest? So that's a good question, because so like I said in the previous webinar, we actually had an example towards the end to show how Flix would work with an application like Hero, or Hero Player, or Nuke Studio, any of that has a timeline basically. And the way we did that wasn't with XMLs or anything like that. It was all done through the API, which meant that in Hero Player, and imagine you could just replace that with Premiere, we just had a button in there to say pull the latest edit, and without any files or anything, it would just reconstruct your whole timeline directly in Hero Player or Hero from the data, in Flix. And the same was true the other way around. You could just make some edits directly in your timeline, click the sync to Flix button or something, and it would update the timing in your sequence directly in Flix automatically without having to deal with any file transfer, which is really the key. Right now, that is the way it is with Premiere. We send XMLs back and forth, but with Flix, we're really aiming to abstract the concept of files. We don't want you to talk in XMLs or AAFs. We want you to talk in terms of timelines and shots and sequences and things like that. So that is definitely something that we're interested in, especially with Adobe's new UXP format. There's a lot more support and capabilities that will allow us to make Flix and Premiere talk together without files being visible and transported all over the place, which is always an issue, in productions. All right, I don't see any other questions. Let me see. A couple of updates. Like I told Woody earlier, layer transforms is a big thing that we'll be bringing with 6.4. Just like the ability to have better options on how you send those camera moves and layer transforms to and from Editorial. Is it that you want to see animation in Flix and you want to see it in Editorial, or not in either, or just in one and the other? So we're going to rework some of that, which is going to be fun. We are hoping to do a lot more with Storyboard Pro, especially with, you saw early in the webinar, Terry added a lot of comments to panels in the edit. But then when you reconform in Storyboard Pro, right now those comments don't translate. And the plan is to have those comments to be completely in sync between Flix and Storyboard Pro, so that when you're a story artist and you're working in Storyboard Pro, you don't have to always refer to Flix. You would have your comments from Flix directly in your Storyboard Pro project, which would be helpful. And same thing on the Avid side. If we can push comments as metadata to Avid or to Premiere, you can then display in your sequence monitor as burn-ins. That would make it much better for everyone. Right?
There's another question here from Ash. Brice, will Flix have a basic sketching function built in?
I mean, we have annotations. I would not call that basic sketching function. Never say never. I think it's a big thing. If you look at Photoshop, who's been doing this for years, Storyboard Pro has also been doing this for years, and they're very, very good at it. And one of the points in Flix is to make sure that every creative in a production can use the applications that they are comfortable with. So, if you like Storyboard Pro, if you've worked with Storyboard Pro for 10 years, we don't want you to have to learn Photoshop or TV Paint or Sketchbook Pro or something. We want you to be comfortable with the apps that you use. So for now, that's really the idea. So that's why there's no sketching function built in Flix right now, at least.
There's another question there about how do you work with team pricing. I think there's a couple of people in this webinar, Angel and Rodolfo, that could probably help Nathan out, reach out to him on that.
Can't we see the screen instead of the panelist webcam? I don't know.
No, because that part's finished. So now the Q&A is just us.
I guess so. I could share my screen, but there is nothing exciting on there.
Good question. I think that's it, Brice.
All right. Yeah. Emma, which really is Elise, who was here at the start of this, just that, yeah, you can contact sales@foundry.com if you want more information for pricing, set of demos, and things like that. Mark, when's the next update coming out? So we still have maintenance releases, patch releases coming out pretty regularly. The 6.4 release is planned mid next year. Really, there's a decent amount of work that still need doing. There's exciting things, like auto updater and things like that. So yeah, we'll try to put out alphas and videos on LinkedIn and things like that as features get built, just to get everyone updated. All right. Well, yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you all for your time. It was great. I'm glad that we ended the Foundry year of webinars with Flix. I didn't know that coming into this, so that makes me happy. So yeah, thank you all for your time. And yeah, hoping to see you next year for more webinars, Flix, and others. So thank you. Have a good rest of your days.
Thanks, everybody.